On a summer morning in 1996, the President of the United States walked onto the White House lawn and told the world we were no longer alone. The proof was a rock, 4 pounds of gray stone from Mars, sitting in a NASA lab in Houston. Inside it, scientists said, were the fossils of something that had once been alive. It was front-page news on every continent. For a few hours, the oldest question you ever asked as a child, "Are we alone?" finally had an answer, and the answer was no. Then, over the next 30 years, we quietly took it back. But here is the part nobody tells you. The rock never confessed. Every piece of the evidence was attacked, explained away, and set aside, and not one piece of it was ever actually proven dead. This is the story of the most important rock on Earth, and the question we still cannot answer about it. Its name is ALH 84001. It was found in 1984, lying on the blue ice of Antarctica, where a meteorite hunter on a snowmobile picked it up, bagged it, and labeled it without a second thought. It is one of the oldest things human hands have ever held. It formed on Mars more than 4 billion years ago, when the young planet still had rivers and a thick sky and warm water standing on its surface. Then 16 million years ago, an asteroid slammed into Mars and blasted this piece of it into space. It drifted through the dark, fell toward Earth, and came down on the Antarctic ice around 13,000 years ago. Think about what that number means. It lay on that ice through the entire story of our species, through the first farms and the first cities, through the pyramids, through every empire that ever rose and fell, through every war and every name you have ever heard. It waited in the cold for someone to walk up, pick it up, and finally ask what was inside. For years, no one suspected a thing. Then a team at NASA cut it open and put it under their most powerful microscopes. What they found did not make sense. There were tiny round globules of carbonate, the kind that on Earth only form in water. Threaded through them were chains of magnetite crystals. They were identical to the ones certain bacteria grow inside their own bodies, like microscopic compass needles. There were organic molecules, the carbon building blocks that every living thing is written in. And then there were the shapes. Long, segmented, worm-like forms, far too small for any eye to see, curled across the broken face of the stone. On Earth, structures shaped like that are made by one thing, and one thing only: life. If you could shrink to the size of a bacterium and walk across that rock, you would be standing in a field of shapes that, on our entire planet, only living things have ever left behind. This was the evidence the president stood behind. If you were alive that summer, you saw the headlines. For one day, Earth was not the only place life had ever happened, and the textbooks were about to be rewritten. Then the rest of science went to work, and the certainty began to come apart. The magnetite chains, other labs argued, could form with no life at all, baked out of the rock by ancient heat. The organic molecules could have soaked in from meltwater during 13,000 years in the ice. The worm-like shapes were smaller than almost any living cell known to science. Too small, the critics said, to hold the machinery of life inside them. One by one, every line of evidence was handed a second explanation. But notice what that is. Not a disproof, an alternative. A way the rock could be dead, set quietly beside the way the rock could be alive. And because we could not prove it was life, we agreed to call it not life. The headlines reversed. The rock went into a drawer, but an explanation is not a verdict. The scientist who led the discovery, David McKay, spent the rest of his life defending it. He kept publishing, kept answering the critics, kept pointing back at the rock, until he died in 2013 with the question still wide open. His team has never taken a word of it back. And here is the part that should keep you awake. 1996 was not the first time this happened. 20 years earlier, in 1976, two Viking landers ran the only direct search for life we have ever placed on the surface of Mars. They scooped up the red soil, fed it a drop of nutrients, and waited to see if anything in the dirt would breathe. Something did. 4 separate times, on 2 landers sitting 4,000 miles apart. The instruments traced the exact signature of living metabolism. The scientist who designed that experiment, Gilbert Levin, looked at those curves and said it plainly. We had found life. He went on saying it for the rest of his life. But a different instrument on the same landers searched the soil for organic molecules and came back empty. So NASA ruled that some strange chemistry, not biology, had faked the signal. We had a positive result for life on Mars, and we talked ourselves out of it. 20 years before we did it all over again. So why does a rock we supposedly debunked still matter? Because of what it did to us. The fear that we had just missed the single biggest discovery in human history changed the course of an entire space agency. NASA built a whole institute to study the question of life beyond Earth. Almost every Mars mission since, every rover that has crawled across that red ground traces its bloodline back to the panic of nearly knowing. Decades later, the Curiosity rover would taste organic molecules in the Martian dirt. It watched methane rise and fall with the seasons, the kind of gas that, on Earth, life breathes into the air. Nothing proven, everything still open. Right now, the Perseverance rover is drilling cores out of Martian rock and sealing them inside metal tubes, one by one. It is setting them on the surface for a future mission to carry home. We are going back for the rocks, because the first one asked a question we could never answer, but could never quite drop either. ALH 84001 is still here, sealed under glass in Houston, behind a door that takes more than one key. 4 billion years old, 16 million years adrift in space, 13,000 years on the ice, and 30 years now of human beings standing over it, unable to agree on what it is. We called it life, then we called it a mistake. The honest truth is that we still do not know which one of those is right. A piece of another world is lying in a vault tonight, and it is either carrying the dead or carrying the answer. We just were not brave enough to believe it.